So I want to start to focus on animating this walk cycle, and I've posted a couple of references inside Blackboard. If you go down and look at the walk cycle examples, that'll take you to a link on my blog, and if you just take a look at a couple of these examples, there's just some I'm not going to look at all of these, but you can take a look. And these animations, though they loop for a little while, the animations are pretty short and sweet. And, just a couple of different examples. Some of them have a different weight, kind of a different character to them as they walk. And we'll experiment with a few things as we go. So, and as I mentioned, we will approach this animation from a couple of different directions. So just a couple of examples. There's tons of examples out there on Vimeo and YouTube as well. So take a look at these. You might even go back to these as reference as well. Some models are more complex than the ones that we're using, but you'll get the idea. So the first thing is always look at examples, get inspiration. The other thing is that there's a pretty famous walk cycle representation, a breakdown by Preston Blair, and there's you can research Preston Blair and find out more about him online, but there's a really great document here that sort of breaks down a couple of different walk cycles in really simple terms, and also adds a lot of different styles of walk. So we're going to focus on the walk, but we'll also take a crack at maybe at least an alternate walk, maybe a jump or a sneaky walk or a tiptoe or something else. But for now, we're going to focus on just a simple walk cycle. And so this is a great document to come back to just to kind of get a sense of the basic mechanics of motion. So there are several good books out there about animation. There's a really great one called The Mechanics of Motion. You can look that up on Amazon.com, and I have a copy of it floating around here in the department if you happen to be on campus and want to take a peek at it. It's a really great resource. So not to mention there's several examples on Safari Books online which are free. If you start doing a little bit of research on walk cycles, you're going to find tons of information. So I'll give you the basic nuts and bolts to get started. And I'm going to keep this up as a reference, just something to go back to remind myself of a few things as we go. So, and in addition to looking at walk cycles of other animation, either 2D or 3D, and looking at still illustration or references, another thing that you can do is just walk and pay attention to what your body's doing as you walk around. And if you keep in mind, when you walk, there's a couple of things that we want to pay attention to. The first thing is right now my model is in a neutral position. Now, if you think about the way that you walk, your body is never in this position as you walk. It might be in that position when you're standing still, but not when you're walking. So at no point are your legs and your arms going to be completely standing straight up next to each other. There's always going to be some kind of variation going on. Another thing to keep in mind is that we are working on a walk cycle, which means that we're going to create 1 or 2 seconds of animation, and that animation should loop. It should end in the same state that it begins. So we should be able to play this animation over and over for as long as we want, and it should seem seamless. Okay, and in order for that to happen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on not 90 frames of animation, but I'm going to focus in on 30 frames of animation, or 1 second in time. Okay, now we can extend this if we need to, and what I'm going to do is down in this timeline at the end of the slider here, I'm going to change the 90 end frame to 30. And this will be the extent of our animation for now to complete one full step in the walk cycle. So I'm going to start to move forward with the animation, and but before I do, I want to pose this character in the first position. Okay, so and this is a good place to start to look at some reference. And if I just jump back to the Preston Blair example. If I look here and think about this as part of a walk cycle, the first position, I want to position 1 foot forward and 1 foot back. And I'll do that by simply going into my model, and again, I'm just going to pose this. So what I'll do is I'm going to find my lower body. I'm going to go to my right upper leg, okay, and I'll just establish that I want this to be the first foot that's in the forward position. Now, when I rotate this, I could rotate this to some kind of arbitrary number. I'm at 35.1. That seems like kind of a strange solution, but it feels pretty good in terms of how far forward that foot is. I don't like the value of 35.135, which I've rotated here. So I'm just going to get rid of, I'm going to stick with 35 as the rotation value. Okay, now that's going to be an important number. It doesn't have to be 35, but whatever it is, I want to make a note of that. And so I have a piece of paper next to me, and I'm jotting down just some notes as a production log, so that as I need to reference this, when I rotate the left leg forward, or the other leg, the leg that's straight, when I rotate that one forward, I want to rotate that to a position of negative 35. And it might be that in the back position, positive 35 might not be far enough. So maybe I want to rotate back to 40. That's for you to decide, and you'll figure that out as you go. But you do want to just make some simple notes along the way. So I've decided that my leg forward is going to be at a value of negative 35. And again, I'm just going to undo to stand that right back up. And what I could do also is when I rotate, I'll hold down the shift key and rotate that red axis. And now I'm snapping to 5-degree increments. So it might be a little bit more intuitive than working down here in the coordinates manager. Okay, but I got the front leg. Now I'll choose the back leg, and I'm just going to hold down the shift key and rotate that backwards. Let's see how 35 does. Maybe I'll keep the math simple for now. I really feel like that leg should go farther back though, so let's see. Let me shift, and I'll rotate, and I'm watching my heads-up display, and I'll go back to 40. So I'll make a note that when the leg goes back, I want to rotate it back to 40. Well, I'm starting to second guess that, and I'm going to make it 35 as well, just to make the math a little bit easier. We can add some variation to it here in a short bit. So again, I'm working on the first pose, or the first position, and so we can go back to our reference. We can go back to look at our examples, or we can just walk around and we can ask ourselves, so what's happening when our left leg, or our right leg, according to Cinema 4D, is forward? Where is our corresponding arm, the arm on the same side of the body? Is it forward with the leg? So are we kind of marching, or are we walking in a casual stride? And so as you start to develop this animation, you might want to get up and walk around, and as I said before, and look at examples, and it'll probably take you 3 or 4, several tries to get this. But my goal right now is just to get this thing into the neutral position. Now, one of the things that I might not have mentioned before I started this presentation is I did save. I got this whole thing rigged, and I saved incremental. And once I get this thing back into a starting position, I'll save once again. So I'm going to find an upper arm, and I'm going to rotate that forward by 35 degrees. I'm going to grab the other arm, and I'll rotate that back 35 degrees. Okay, and I think that'll be pretty good for a starting position. Now, again, it's looking a little stiff right now, but we'll add some character to this in just a minute. Now, another thing I want to mention is I did not introduce any keyframes at this point. I am just positioning this object or my character to start walking. One thing that I'm seeing that's a little distracting is that my key light, I don't like the way that it's showing up. It's displaying its light cone. Now, I have a couple of different a couple different strategies for controlling my environment. A really simple way to control this is that I have my light inside the scene, and there's these two little, what's called stoplights. They're these, or this traffic light. There's the two little bullets that sit on top of each other, these two little gray icons. The top one, if I click on it, it'll turn green. If I click on it again, it'll turn red. Okay, and what that does is that tells me that I can preview that either in preview, so I can turn it off in the preview, and I can turn it on in the renderer or off in the renderer. So this corresponds to the preview that we're working in. So if I take my floor object and I make it red, I'm turning it off, so I'm not seeing that in the preview mode. If I turn it off in my renderer, which is the second icon down, and I render that, I won't see the floor. Okay, so we can kind of manage some of our assets, whether they're turned on. The default position is that everything, of course, is on. This is what my environment looks like right now. And the key light, what I'd hope to do, though, is I hope that when I turn this off in preview, there it goes. The first time I did it, I didn't see those cones disappear, but now I'm seeing them disappear. That was my goal. So again, that top icon, if you click it until it turns red, that's going to force that off in the preview. Now when I render it, I still have my light turned on, so it looks just the way it does, but I don't have to fight with it in my viewport. There's another way to handle this, which is working in layers. Layers in a 3D space is a little bit different than layers in a 2D space, and so I'll give you a little presentation on that. We'll do that. I see I'm running at about 11 minutes here, so I'll save that for the next presentation.